Hello coders, welcome back to Code Labs, and this is the first ever video on the channel. This is also the first video in a series called the Python Basics series, which will teach you the basics you need for Python. There's also an accompanying Hashnode blog article, which is the first link in the description if you prefer to read. Okay, most of you have heard of AI and you've probably used it. Examples such as ChatGPT and Google Bard. Python is the leading programming language in data science, AI, and machine learning. If you plan to major in one of those fields, knowing Python is essential. Python is a high-level programming language, which means it tries to be as close to the English language as possible. Python is also interpreted, meaning a program called an interpreter runs through your program line by line and executes it. One vocab word you should know is the way you write a language is called its syntax. Most people find Python more readable than other programming languages. Okay, let's start off. Before we type or code anything, we have to make sure Python is installed in your system. Most systems have Python installed, but to make sure yours does, we're going to follow the following steps. You can read these, and I'm going to say them out loud. Open your command prompt on Windows, terminal on Mac, or command prompt on Linux. So I'm going to do that right now. And you're going to type in the following command: Python --version. If you get a number like this, then you're all good to go. However, if you get an error like this, then you're going to head to the second link in the description and you're going to download Python. After that, you're going to come back to this video and you're going to resume. To code Python, you can code it in Notepad and save the file and run it with Python. But I highly recommend using Visual Studio Code, which is the app I'm using right now, which is the third link in the description, or JetBrains PyCharm, which is the fourth link in the description, and it's like Visual Studio Code, but specially for Python. Okay, let's get into some basic syntax for Python. As defined earlier, syntax is the way a programming language is written. So let's start off easy. Let's do what every developer does when they start learning a new programming language, and let's print hello world to the console. The console is where your program can write output, such as writing the result of an operation to the console. In Python, to print something to the console, you need to type print, and in between the parentheses, you need to type what you want to output. So to print hello world, you would type print hello world with parentheses before and after hello world. Make sure to put double quotes around hello world, else you'll get an error. So typically, outputs in the console look like this in VS Code. So we can run this line of code and we see hello world. If we try and remove the double quotes, VS Code is already telling us that we can't do this. And if we try running it, we're going to get an error. So make sure to put the double quotes. You'll understand why later. Now time for a quiz. How would you print "My name is John and I am 43 years old" to the console? No, my name is not actually John and I'm not 43. Here's how you'd print that. And this is what it looked like in the console. Let's run this code now. There you go. It printed correctly. Okay, we're done with basic print statements. Now, let's move to a very core and essential part of every programming language. And if you've worked with other programming languages prior to this point, you know that variables are very useful and important in any program. But what are they? Variables are the names given to different locations in a computer's memory. So let's say you had a form and you want to store the user's personal information for later use. Well, you could define a variable called first name to store their first name and store it to the first name field on the form. Let's say for this example that the first name was John. The value John would be stored somewhere in computer memory, and whenever you reference the first name variable in your program, the word John would be retrieved from the computer's memory and used as needed. Even though Python is dynamically typed, which means you do not need to specify the type of a variable when you declare that variable, I still think we should learn about the different types of variables as it is useful to know. There are a few different types of variables to store different types of values in Python. Here are the primary ones. There's a string that stores a series of characters such as John. When declaring a string as the value to a variable, you must put double quotes or single quotes around the value. This is why we had to put the double quotes around hello world from earlier, because Python was thinking that hello world without the double quotes was a variable, but when we put the double quotes, it thought it was a string and printed it perfectly fine. In English terms, a string is either a letter, a word, or one or more sentences. Next, we have int, which stands for integer. These can be any number, but not decimals, so it has to be whole numbers, such as -1, 0, 5, 686, anything, as long as it's not a decimal. When assigning an int as the value to a variable, you just put the number with nothing surrounding it. No double quotes, no single quotes, nothing like a string, just the number. If you look here, we're defining an int, and this would be an int, but this would be a string. After ints, we have floats. In other programming languages, there are two separate variable types for a float and double. Typically, a double can store longer decimals, making it more precise. But in Python, floats and doubles are essentially combined into floats. Regardless, both store decimal values such as -1.44, 3.14, 43.341. You get the point. And lastly, we have a boolean. Short form is bool. This can only store true or false values, such as is the game over or not. Don't feel like you have to memorize these. It is just simple to know. Like they sometimes appear in Python error messages. Okay, now we're going to learn how to declare or like make your own variables. When you're declaring a variable, you should follow one of these syntaxes. For strings, you should declare the variable name, and then in double quotes, put the value of that string. After this, we have floats, which goes by the format the variable name equals some decimal. Next, we have integers. Integers, declaring an integer goes by the format of variable name equals some whole number. And next, we have booleans. So the way you declare a boolean is the variable name equals true with a capital T or false with a capital F. Okay, here's a small quiz. How would you define two variables? One called name, which is a string with the value of John, and another called age with a value of 43. And age is an int, by the way. Okay, here's the answer. So this is how you declare that. You'd say name equals John in double quotes, surrounded by double quotes, because to make sure it's a string, you have to surround it in double quotes. Next, we'd say age equals 43 with no double quotes, because if you put double quotes, it's a string. And in this case, we want it to be an integer. If you got that, good job. You're well on your way to understanding the basics of Python. If you got it wrong, don't worry about it. Now we're going to combine the two concepts we just learned, which are print statements and variables. Let's say we declare a variable called first name and it's equal to John. What if we wanted to print the value of first name to the console? What if we declare a variable called first name and we set its value equal to John? Now, what if we wanted to print the value of first name to the console? So we want to print John without explicitly typing John to the console. How would you think we do that? The way we can print the value of a variable to the console is by saying print and a variable name. So based on that, you should have easily gotten that the answer is print first name without any double quotes. So let's try to run this. And there you go. We got John, and it's from the first name variable. So if we were to change the word John to something like Jane, and we run this again, we get Jane. It's reading the value of the first name variable and then printing that. Now, let's see if you understood the variable types. What would be printed to the console if I were to run this print statement and this print statement? The answer would be this. The first one would print the actual string of first underscore name. The second one would print the name of John. The reason for that is because the first print statement has the word first name surrounded by double quotes. So Python thinks it's a string and prints a string to the console. However, the second one doesn't have the double quotes. So Python thinks it's a variable name and prints the value of the variable to the console. So if you don't trust me on that, here's what we were talking about. And if you look there, instead of John, it said Jane. So there, it says John. Thank you for taking your time today to learn the basics of Python. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below or in the comments section on the Hashnode article, which should be the first link in the description and releases around the same time as this video. Thank you for watching.